Hey guys, how's everybody doing today? It's Steve the drummer coming at you, and I wanted to ask one very fundamental question today. Are electronic drum sets too expensive? And I just want to kind of frame that question a little bit. So very recently here in the last couple of months, Roland has come out with their new VAD line of drums. The I don't even know what the acronym stands for. I think Virtual Acoustic Drum Designs. They've got a 503, a 506, and a 306 are the product numbers, I believe. And so, right out of the gate, they introduce this new product, and immediately everyone jumps on the bandwagon with two primary criticisms. Number one, people perceive them to be ridiculously expensive, and number two, people think that they don't sound very good. And so I wanted to kind of dive into at least half of that today and talk a little bit about electronic drums and the cost of electronic drums and try to maybe address the fundamental question, are electronic drums too expensive? Okay, so kind of with that in mind, right out of the gate, number one, my videos 99.99% of the time go way, way, way too long, and this one is going to be no different. So I'm going to save you some time. Yes, electronic drums are too expensive. Big surprise there. But there is a little bit more, and if you've got a little bit of time, I hope that you'll bear with me and maybe we can discuss this a little bit. So what I'd like to do here is I'd like to maybe draw some comparisons. I'd like to draw some comparisons between some electronic drum kits and an acoustic drum kits, just to try to give some comparisons and some relevance. I think when a lot of people look at an electronic drum set, they see mesh heads, or maybe not. They see rubber pads. They see pieces of plastic, pieces of metal, maybe some type of piezo sensor, some wires, and then eventually some type of processor or aka module that puts all this together into sounds. And they look at these components and they look at these prices and they think to themselves, how in the world can this stuff be as expensive as it is? And I would endeavor to say that there's more to the story, and I'd like to try to at least put my spin on what I think about that. You can address this in so many different ways, and honestly, whether you're choosing to buy electronic drums or whether you're choosing to buy acoustic drums, it's really hard to make a completely apples to apples comparison. But I am going to try to narrow this down a little bit. I mean, when you look from the acoustic or from the electronic standpoint, there's multiple manufacturers. There's Roland, there's Alesis, there is Yamaha, Pearl makes the Mimic. There is other manufacturers like ATV, Jobeki, Drumtech. These two different companies make different components, but for the sake of trying to make this video as clean and streamlined as possible, I'm just going to focus on Roland drums. I'm going to focus on three particular products today. I want to talk about the TD17, I want to talk about the TD27, and I want to talk about the TD50. Now, you could look at, like I said, you could look at multiple manufacturers and multiple products, and you could do the same with acoustic drums. And then you could also look at new versus used. I want to try to make this as streamlined and even as I possibly can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off, I'm going to discuss some comparisons maybe to the TD17 line. Okay, so before I dive into the Roland TD17 specifically, I want to make some comparisons to some acoustic drums. So just making a quick search here, and like I say, I'm not going in depth. I'm not going on the used market. I'm not going to Reverb. I'm not going to, I don't know, any of the I'm not really digging here. I just went to the Sweetwater website and I'm just kind of kicking around here, and I came up with four different drum sets. One is the Yamaha Stage Customs. Another is the Pearl Export. Another is the Gretsch Catalina Maple, and the Ludwig Element. And all of these look like essentially the starter kit for each one of these manufacturers. However, I think at least two or three of these manufacturers have products that are probably even priced slightly below this. But when I look at these Yamaha Stage Custom drums, and actually I had a set of Yamaha Stage Customs for about the better part of 8 to 10 years, and that was honestly probably one of my favorite drum sets that I ever played. You're in the $750 price point range for that drum set. Comes with a kick drum, two rack toms, and a floor tom, and a matching snare drum. So you're talking about a 5-piece drum set, and you're in the price point range of around $750. You might find it sometimes for as little as $699, or in some cases as much as $800. But just to round it off, let's just call it $750 is probably about where you're looking at on that particular drum set. Ludwig Element, Gretsch Catalina Maple, also very similar price points around the $750 range. All three of these drum sets, and I didn't dig too deeply into the Ludwig Element, but the Catalina Maple and the Yamaha Stage Customs in particular, don't include hardware. So you're going to have to buy a separate hardware package to go with that, and we'll get into that here in just a second. Additionally, the Pearl export kit. Pearl came out with the export kit, I think, back in the 80s, and that's been a very, very, very popular introductory line of drums for a long time. I had a kit of Pearl exports at one point, and I also enjoyed playing that drum set very much. Also, around the $750 price point, I will say that they do include hardware with that kit, though. They do include a hi-hat stand, a couple of cymbal stands, I think at least one or two cymbal stands, and a snare stand and a hi-hat stand. So at least some of the hardware is included. And when I say a kit that does include hardware or doesn't include hardware, I think pretty much everything includes like the tom mounts. But generally speaking, most drum sets now are coming without snares, without a snare stand, without a hi-hat stand, and without cymbal stands. And so you're going to have to buy a separate hardware package that in some cases is going to cost you anywhere from, maybe on the low side, maybe as little as $150, but probably more like $250 to $350 and up, that you're going to have to add to that cost. So like I say, pretty consistently here coming up around the $750 price point for these different products. And then in most cases, like I say, you're going to have to add in an additional $300-ish for your hardware. And that also does not include cymbals. So let's talk about cymbals for a second. Now looking here just really quickly at cymbals, obviously there's multiple ways to go here. There's multiple manufacturers, there's multiple products. Sometimes you can buy cymbals in packs, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if you're buying a starter set, the Stage Customs or the exports or the Catalina or the Ludwig Element or the drums that we were talking about before, you're probably going to buy your cymbals in a pack. That pack's going to probably include at least a set of hi-hats, probably 14-inch hi-hats, at least one crash, if not two crashes, generally a 16 and an 18-inch crash, and then a 20-inch or so ride cymbal. And so on the low end, I'm looking at the Zildjian S-Series Performer 4-piece cymbal set, and that's basically $434. And the Zildjian, I know they've got the K line, they've got the A line, they've got multiple different products. This S-Series would very much so be in their starter range of cymbals. Looking up the page a little bit further to the Zildjian A box set, the very basic Zildjian A box set, the A391s, $697 essentially, and you get a 14-inch hi-hat, you get 14-inch A new beat hi-hats, 16A medium thin crash, 21A sweet ride, plus an 18-inch crash. So you're looking at two crash cymbals, a ride cymbal, and hi-hats, and those are good quality cymbals, especially for the money. And you're looking at basically $697 there. So if you take the $750 for the drums and the 300 or so odd dollars for the hardware, that brings you up a little over $1,000, and then you spend somewhere between $400 and $600 or $700 on your cymbals. You're looking at a total drum set cost somewhere in the ballpark of maybe, let's say you bought the Pearl exports with the hardware, so you didn't have to do that. You might be able to get out the door, and you bought the Zildjian S-Series cymbals, you might be able to get out the door for around $1,100. Or if you bought the Yamaha kit and you needed to buy the hardware package and the cymbals, and you bought the nicer cymbals, you might be looking at as much as $1,700 or $1,800 on that. Now let's take a second and look at that and compare that against the Roland TD17 line. And once again, to try to keep the playing field just as level and fair as possible, I'm not going to Reverb. I'm not going to any of the sites. I'm not looking at any used gear. I'm just going right off of Sweetwater. I'm just going right off of their map pricing, their manufacturer's advertised pricing right off of the website. TD17, you can buy the KVX version, which is probably the most deluxe version of the TD17, for $1,800. They've got the KV version for $1,200, and they've got the KL version, which I'm assuming KL stands for K Lite, for $1,000, and you can buy the module separately for $619 if you're trying to put the module together with another drum set. If you already have a set of electronic pads and you're trying to pair that module with those pads. So basically, you're looking at $1,000 to $1,800 out the door, depending on which TD17 product you get. And like I say, if you look at the KL versus the KV versus the KVX, I should say, as you go up in products, the price goes up. You're using the same module on all of them, but you get bigger pads, you get more pads, and that basically differentiates the price between those lines. So I sum all that up to say TD17s out the door, you're looking at between $1,000 and $1,800. And if you look at the Yamaha Stage Custom acoustic drums, or the Pearl Export acoustic drums, or the Ludwig Element acoustic drums, or the Gretsch Catalina Maple Series acoustic drums with hardware and cymbals, you might be able to go as low as $1,000, but you're probably looking at somewhere between $1,000 and $1,800 out the door. So essentially, it's the same cost. It's essentially whether you go with the electronic or acoustic in that comparison. It's pretty much the same cost. So let's say you want to step it up a little bit in quality here from the TD17. They've just introduced the new TD27 line. So let's talk a little bit about the TD27 line. And first off, I'm just going to talk about the module for a second. I'm just going to talk about the regular TD17 or TD27 KV drum set. So basically, they're selling the module for $1,200, and they're selling the TD27 KV drum set for, I believe, just under $3,000, if I'm looking at this correctly. It's a little bit confusing because they've got all these different bundles available also, where you can add a pad, or you can add a pad and a BT1 trigger bar, and so manufacturers distributors like Sweetwater are starting to muddy the water a little bit with some bundle packs that maybe make the pricing a little bit less transparent. But nonetheless, for a TD27 5-piece drum set, 2 cymbals, 2 crashes, a ride cymbal, hi-hats, you're looking at right at $3,000. Now let's try to make some comparable comparisons in terms of acoustic drums. And real quick, before I jump back to the acoustic drums on this, on the TD27, that does support the digital ride cymbal and the digital snare drum. So you've got a module now that supports digital pads, at least 2 digital pads, and a 5-piece drum set with 2 crashes, a ride, and a hi-hat. Price point's $3,000. So where do we stand in terms of $3,000 comparably on acoustic drums? Okay, so let's take a second out and maybe address some comparables in the acoustic side. So I'm looking here. I looked at a couple of different manufacturers, and I have got something from Gretsch, something from Tama, something from DW, and something from Ludwig. And so I'm going to start with Gretsch, Tama, and DW because they're at a slightly lower price point and something that I know less about, and then I'll finish up with Ludwig. So Gretsch Renown drums, $1,500 for a 4-piece kit. That includes 2 racks, 1 floor, the bass drum, and no snare drum. The Tama SLP line is coming in at $1,600. That's a 3-piece kit. That's 1 up, 1 down, 1 rack, 1 floor, a bass drum, no snare drum. And the DW Performer Series, also a 3-piece kit, $1,740 roughly. That's 1 up, 1 down, 1 rack, 1 floor, bass drum, and no snare drum. So in all those cases, not only are you looking at spending $350 or so, now you're probably going to want to get even nicer hardware because you've got nicer drums. So you're going to be solidly at that $350 price point for your hardware. So now you're looking at $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 for the drum set, and in all of these cases, it does not include the snare drum. Now I want to close this particular portion out with the Ludwig Classic Maples, and the reason I want to make sure that I include that is because I own, in addition to my electric drums, I own 1 acoustic drum set. It is a kit of Ludwig Classic Maples. And the price on that has kind of varied a little bit over time. I want to say that when I bought my kit, it was about $2,000. It was high $1,900 range. And right now I see Sweetwater has it for $2,150. And they go back and forth as to whether it includes a snare drum or not. When I bought my kit, it did include a snare drum. However, I've seen different times where Ludwig is shipping that kit without the snare drum, and so it's just coming as a 3-piece kit, much like the other kits that I mentioned prior in this category, where you're looking at maybe 1 up, 1 down, and a kick drum, 1 rack, 1 floor, and 1 kick drum, and then you're going to buy a snare drum separately to match with that. So in these particular cases, you're talking somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 for not a five-piece kit, for a four-piece kit, for one rack tom, one floor tom, and a bass drum, and then you're going to have to buy your snare drum separately. So let's get into a little bit about snare drums. Okay, so the snare drums is actually a really complicated topic, and so I'm going to try to break this up into just a couple of short segments here. But first off, I'm putting in a filter of $100 to $200, and I'm coming up with a quite extensive search. Actually, there's approximately 38 things 38 snare drums that meet this criteria. But when I look at them, a lot of them are saying like Pearl modern utility snare drum. When it comes to snare drum, you can obviously you can get a metal one, you can get a wood one. If you get a wood one, you can get maple, you can get birch, you can get mahogany. You can get there's probably at least 6 or 8 different wood choices. If you go with metal, then you've got steel, you've got aluminum, you've got brass, you've got I don't know. There's probably a bajillion different things that a snare drum can actually be made out of, and all those things do sound different, and they're very personal choices. And then additionally, you've got different sizes. What has become the most common is probably the 5.5 by 14 or the 6.5 by 14, but there's also many other choices, including like really thin snare drums. Piccolo snare drums were very popular back in the late 80s and into the 90s, and then there's also really really big beefy 8-inch 8 by 14 snare drums, or there's all kinds of different sizes. So there's a pretty extensive selection in the $100 to $200 range, but in a lot of cases there you're looking at a product that was probably made overseas and using different materials. And so anyhow, let's kind of delve a little bit deeper into our snare drum selection. And as we go up a little bit in price, we get to things like the Ludwig Superphonic snare drum, and that's like $569. There's a DW snare drum here. It's a DW Collector Series model, 8 by 14 black nickel over brass snare drum. It looks like a really nice snare drum, $469. And then all the way up to and including, and of course there's snare drums beyond this, but there is the Ludwig Black Beauty, which is probably one of the most famous snare drums that's ever been put on recordings. And you've got multiple choices with that. You've got a 5.5 or a 6.5 or an 8. And if you look at the 6.5 is $729. I don't see the 5 right off. But I do see the 8. So you're looking at $729 or $859 if you were to choose. No, that's not it. If you were to choose the Ludwig Black Beauty, the infamous Ludwig Black Beauty snare drum. So I guess my point here is if you buy one of these 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, $2,000 drum sets that is going to include one less tom than your starter sets did, you're also probably going to have to buy a snare drum, and you're going to be looking at on the low side there in the $100 to $200 range. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say if you're not buying a starter drum set, if you're buying a mid-tier drum set, you're probably going to want a pretty nice snare drum to go with that. So you're probably going to be solidly in the $200 to $400 range, if not even in the $500 or $600 or $700 or $800 range. So when you put your let's just go to the middle here. The high of that mid tier for drums was like $2,100, and the low was like $1,500. So let's say you can get your mid tier drum set for $1,800, and then you add a $500 snare drum to it. You're at $2,300, and then you go out and you add your hardware pack to it. Now you're at 23 and 3 or 26, 26 and change. And you haven't put any cymbals with it yet. Now I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if you're going to spend $2,000 on your drum set and $500 on your snare drum, that you're probably going to want something nicer than the bare bones as far as cymbals go. And so just going back to those cymbal packs that we talked about earlier, they've got the S series, they've got the A series, but they've also got the K series as well, and they've got cymbal packs that range in price from $650 up to $1,200 or so, and that's just buying them in combination packs. And when you buy them that way, that is the most efficient way in terms of pricing. But you can obviously you can certainly select your cymbals individually on your own, and that's probably what a lot of people recommend. And when you do so, you're looking at anywhere from $300 to $400 for hi-hats, $300, $400, $500 for ride cymbals, and two or $300 for crash cymbals. And so, let's just say that you bought the $1,000 combo pack of cymbals with the $2,800 now in drums. You're at $3,800 compared to your Roland TD27 drum set, which is a 5-piece drum set, 2 up and 1 down, 2 crash cymbals, a hi-hat and a ride cymbal, digital pads, and you're right at $3,000 on that. So let's go up to the TD50 and see if we can find some justifications for that. So looking at the TD50 line, and I tried to choose things from a couple of different places. Just the basic TD50 right now at Sweetwater is going $49.99.99. So let's just call that $5,000. So you're going to get 1 up, 2 down for toms. You're going to get the digital snare drum. You're going to get, it looks like a KD120, either a KD120 or maybe a KD140 bass drum pad. You've got I think that comes maybe with a VH10 hi-hat. You've got 2 crash cymbals. You got the digital ride cymbal, $5,000. And once again, Sweetwater is muddying the waters a little bit because they're giving you the Roland PM200 monitor, which is, they say, is a $500 value. So $5,000 for a Roland TD50 drum set. 3 toms, kick, snare, 2 crashes, hi-hat, ride cymbal. The module, obviously, it's their current flagship. It supports the digital pads. A couple other options here, the TD50K K180. So now this is the same drum set, but it comes with the 18-inch full-size kick drum. Also comes with the PM200 monitor, $5,500 for that. Or if you went for the TD50 K, let's see here, what is this? I'm sorry. TD50 KVX drum set, and that includes a 22-inch bass drum. So now you got a rack tom, 2 floor toms, 2 crash cymbals, a ride cymbal, the hi-hats, and a full-size 22-inch kick drum. It's $8,000. It's actually $8,100, and that also comes with the $500 Roland PM200 monitor. So you're looking, depending on where you fall in this, somewhere between $5,000 and $8,000. Now, what in the world could Roland be thinking? Oh, I want to throw 2 more things at you here. If you just bought the module straight up by itself, it will be $2,500. If you bought the conversion pack that comes with the module and the 2 digital pads, the 18-inch digital ride cymbal and the 14-inch digital snare drum, you can get that for the low price of $3,500. So is Roland out of their mind here? What are they looking at with that? Let's take a look at let's try to find some comparable acoustic products. So when I get into the higher end stuff on the Sweetwater site, a couple of things that jump out at me. The DW Collector Series is a 5-piece drum set. Once again, it does not include a snare drum. 5 pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's two up, 2 down, 2 racks, 2 floors, and a kick drum. No snare drum, $4,390. $4,390. Ludwig Legacy Maple 3-piece drum set, 1 up, 1 down, no snare drum, and a kick drum is $3,600. Gretsch USA Customs 5-piece drum set. It looks like it may include a snare drum. It's about $4,800, and the Yamaha Recording Customs are $3,829, and I don't think that includes a snare drum. So looking at this, I mean, you're in the you're at least $3,500 to $4,800. So let's just go to the middle of this pack and say about $4,000. If you're spending $4,000 on your drums, on your basic kit, then I don't have a doubt in my mind that you're going to spend at least $500, $600, $700, $800, $900 on a really nice snare drum to go with that. And then obviously you're going to be selecting some really nice cymbals to go with that, to the tune of $300, $400, $500, even $600 a piece. Now the other thing that I want to throw in there is, typically if you're buying drums at that caliber, at that level, then you're probably not just going to have 1 snare drum. You're probably going to have at least 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 snare drums. You're going to want to have at least 1 or 2 wood ones and 1 or 2 metal ones that you're going to use for different sounds. For different situations, for different live situations, or for different recording situations. The same goes for cymbals as well. You're probably going to want to have at least 2 or 3 different ride cymbals in the bag, and probably at least 2 different sets of hi-hats in the bag. and maybe some different choices when it comes to crashes, and also effect symbols like splashes and chinas and things of that nature. So I say all that to say you would very, and that plus your hardware, you would very easily be in that $4,000 to $8,000 range that Roland is charging for their TD50 line. So someone may ask, what in the world? So how can we go from $650 or $750 for a kit of Yamaha Stage Customs, I think it was, all the way up to $4,000 and $5,000 for some of these higher end drum sets? What would make such a difference? And the basic answer to that is the ingredients, the way the wood and the products that they're using in the drums, and the way they're being made is driving the cost up. And there is a difference between a $650 drum set and a $4,000 or a $5,000 drum set. Same is true with cymbals. There's a big difference between the less expensive products and the more expensive products, and with snare drums and with the whole shooting match, honestly. So that is in a nutshell, very basically explaining why there could be such a broad difference in the cost of acoustic drums. Now, when you play electric drums, you have the benefit, whether you're using your module, whether you're using your onboard sounds, or whether you're using software, that you can change all these things basically at the push of a button or the dial of a knob. Now, you could also make the argument that, well, it doesn't sound nearly as good. Some people might make the argument that electronic drums don't sound as good as acoustic drums. And I'd have to say, honestly, in some cases they're probably right, and that's a much, much, much greater discussion. But when I stand back and I look at what is Roland thinking when they charge $1,500 for a TD17 drum set, or $3,000 for a TD27 drum set, or $8,000 for a TD50 drum set, this is what they're looking at. This is exactly what they're looking at. They're not looking at the cost of rubber and mesh, and they're not looking at the cost of piezos, and they're not looking at any of that stuff. What they're looking at is they're looking at the different tiers and the different levels of products available in the acoustic drum line, and they're doing their best to match what they're producing up to the acoustic drum lines to some degree in quality, but very definitely in price. So when Roland advertises a TD50 drum set, a TD50 KVX or whatever, with a 22-inch bass drum for $8,000, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at DW. They're looking at Ludwig. They're looking at Gretsch. They're looking at the high-end stuff. They're looking at Zildjian and Sabian and Paiste, and Meinl and all these different acoustic manufacturers. They're looking at what they're charging, and they're trying to figure out what they can get in relation to that. And I want to close out with just one real quick story here. So early on in my working career, when I left college very, very prematurely, aka I did not graduate, and so I was a person of very limited skills, and I went to work in the restaurant business, and I did that for approximately 12 years. And in and of itself, that's not necessarily the body of the story, but what I do want to say here is I was in the restaurant business for about 12 years. I wore many hats. I had many different responsibilities, and one of those responsibilities that I had for a period of time was purchasing agent. It was my job to sit down with the vendors and to find the best possible quality products that I could and get them for the most reasonable price that I could for my business, and try to operate my business as economically as possible, but also offering the best possible quality that I could for my customers. And so that was my job essentially in that particular role, was to get the best things that I could for as cheap as I could. Well, fast forward a little bit, eventually I went into sales, and I became a salesperson for a broadline distributor, a broadline food company. And basically what that means is a food company that sells multiple products to restaurants, hotels, and country clubs, and they have the ability to sell them everything from the equipment that they use to cook with, to the dishes that they serve the food on, to their fresh produce and fresh meats and fresh seafood, to their canned goods. You're trying to be a one-stop shop and carry it all. When I made the transition from being a purchasing agent and trying to get products as the best possible quality for the least amount of money as I possibly could, when I went to the other side of the table and I became a salesperson, it took me a little bit of time to recognize that my newfound responsibility was to try to get as much money as I possibly could. I wasn't trying to give things as cheaply as possible. Honestly, I was being paid on profit. And so my job and my responsibility was to generate as much profit as possible. And obviously, customers are sitting on the other side of the table doing what I used to do. They want to get the products as cheaply as possible. And so, basically the roles reversed. That was a mental shift for me to learn to go from trying to get as much good quality stuff as I could for as little money as possible to trying to maximize my profits as a salesperson. Roland and any other business is no different. They are trying to maximize their profit and they're trying to look for comparables. Are you going to go out and play a DW whatever kit with a Ludwig Black Beauty snare drum and Zildjian Ks and all these really nice products? Or are you in a situation where you need to play electronic drums for whatever reason, based on maybe a volume control or whatever it may be, and so you're trying to get the best possible quality that you can, and Roland knows that, and they're going to try to get as much as they can. And this is what they're looking at. They're looking at the price of Zildjian. They're looking at the price of Paiste. They're looking at the price of Sabian. They're looking at the price of DW. They're looking at these things when they're creating their price list. They're not necessarily looking at what Alesis is doing or what Yamaha is doing or what any other electronic drum manufacturer is doing. And I'm not trying to talk negative about any of those companies. I'm just saying that is Roland's strategy and any company's strategy when it comes to their pricing. And so when you look at the new stuff that they're coming up with, they've got the VAD line. They've got, looking at my notes here, they've got the VAD 503, the 506, and the 306, and they basically got drum sets anywhere from $2,500 to just under $5,000. And they're acoustic looking. They're virtual acoustic drums. 2 of those 3 come with the TD27 module, which supports the 18-inch digital ride and the 14-inch digital snare, and then one comes with the TD17, which is not the digital products and all. But when they are creating products and doing their research and development and doing their marketing, that's what they're looking at. They're not looking at the price of piezos and mesh and rubber and whatever else, the materials that go into it. They're looking at the comparables on the acoustic side. Anyhow, this video got very long and I ranted a lot and all. I hope that you stuck with me. Give me your thoughts. What obviously, I started this off by saying, are electronic drums too expensive? Heck yeah, they are. And for that matter, musical instruments are expensive. The best way to keep kids out of trouble these days, teach them to play an instrument, because they'll never have any money for anything else. Have a great day, guys.